Hello and welcome to the solution video for my next puzzle titled Hidden Patterns. This is a notably simpler puzzle compared to the first two that I've posted. So if you want to take a try at some harder ones, feel free to check those out after this. Want kind of a more simpler start point, this is probably the one to start with. Not thematically connected at all to either of the previous puzzles, it's just a one-off one. I felt like trying to mess around with the idea of an XV puzzle because I personally really like solving them. So let's take a quick look through the rules here. We have normal Sudoku rules apply, so that is the standard 1 to 9 in each row, column, and box. While doing that, we must also obey the rules of XZ restraints, which means anytime we have a V in the grid like this, whatever these two digits are must sum to 5. And a little bit of tip on that, that means these can only ever be 1, 2, 3, or 4, because you would never be able to have a V with a 5 on it, because you would have to add 5 plus 0, which is not a Sudoku digit. Similarly, X's, same idea, but they sum to 10 instead. And at first glance, that doesn't seem very helpful, because there's a lot of ways to make 10. There's 4 ways to make 10. They're going to come real in handy here. If you're new to this sort of puzzle, this will be very good practice at just being able to think about the options. I'm probably going to pencil mark them for the duration of the video here, just so we can visually see them. Eventually, you'll be able to solve this just doing it all in your head. And so we have either 1, 9, 2, 8, 3, 7, or 4, 6. So until we make progress in other parts of the grid, they're not going to be super duper helpful. There is a interesting restraint on this as well, though, that says all possible X's and V's are given. So what that means is, any time that it's possible to have an X or a V next between things, there must be an X or a V to indicate that. So this would not be able to be existing in the grid, 6 next to a 4, because there's no X here in between them. Similarly, we cannot have a 1 next to this here, if this was a 4, because there would need to be a V indicating, well, these must sum to 5, that means they must have a V there. And that is going to be a probably more restrictive thing than you maybe realize at first, but we need to make some decent progress into the grid before we take the power of that. Other rules, we have this orange line up here, which we call a Dutch whisper line. And what that means is whatever is next to each other on the line, so adjacent digits, must be different by at least 4. So if this was a 2, that would mean that whatever's here must be different by at least 4. Not exactly 4. It might be exactly 4, but at least 4. Meaning at least a 6, 7, 8, or 9. Same down here. Now, to test your understanding, see if you can see why this would not work. And if you're not sure of that, think about what's happening up here. 2 with the 6, 7, 8, 9 up there, that's on a V. Not have that, because we can't sum 6, 7, 8, or 9 to be a 5. That's just one example of a way that this line would not look in the end. Final rule, we have a single white dot in the center here, a little bit offset, and that means whatever is on this dot must be consecutive. So if we have a 2 there, this would need to be a 1 or a 3 on that side to be consecutive with the 2. Similarly, if that was a 6, that could be a 5 or a 7. Right. And with that in place, you pause the video here if you'd like to go try and take a stab at solving it yourself. Otherwise, let's take a look at how to break into this puzzle. So the first step we can maybe do is do some pencil marking, which I mentioned earlier. I think a lot of people tend to avoid this on XV puzzles because they can get very messy very quickly. But I personally think it's pretty useful to have, especially if you're new to this sort of thing and having trouble remembering all the remaining options for things. I think it's useful to at least pencil mark the V's at first, so let's start with that. And by that I mean we can just put the options 1, 2, 3, 4 in each, because we can't have anything else there. So for all of these, if you're new to using Sudoku Pad, I am holding down Control to type in the central digits here. You can also just click the options there for it. 4 and this one. Now, we can do a little bit more pencil marking now, because the X's, even though there's a lot of options for them, we have some progress here. That, say for example this one. We think of what's on an X, again, we have 1, 9, 8, 3, 7, 4, 6. Either way, or no matter which one it is, there's always going to be a low digit and a high digit, in some order. And as we can see here, and in many cases here, we have x's that now we know which side is the low digit. We can pencil mark in 6, 7, 8, 9 as the high digit on the other side of each of those x's. Now I'm going to leave alone the x's here that are just disconnected and on their own, because sure we could put in this sort of thing here, but like that's just messy and it looks icky. As we progress the puzzle, we'll see where that comes in handy. However, there's one more thing we can do here. Might not be right away obvious, but think about the white dot here. We don't know what's on it yet, but we do know that to be consecutive with 1, 2, 3, need to be another 1, 2, 3, 4, or maybe a 5. But it could not be a 5 because this is on an x. That's telling us on this x, the low digit is there, the high digit is here. With that, we have done all the pencil marking we can to at least kind of prep us. Now, there's a lot of people who solve these puzzles, especially XV ones, who are probably chomping at the bit to start coloring the grid, or maybe lettering the grid, to figure out which of these are going to be 6-4 pairs, which will be 8-2, 2-3, etc. If you can figure out a way to solve that for this puzzle, go ahead. I did a little bit of testing. I don't think it's possible. I'm not really good at that approach. That's not really the intended solve path for this one. If you find a way to do it, cool. If not, you can keep watching and we'll see how I design this as the kind of intended break-in. That's, I think, a bit easier than doing that approach. So let's look at the orange line. As we saw in the examples earlier, there's some decent restrictions on this, especially now that we know this has to be a low digit, this has to be a high digit here. Now, normally on these orange lines, we're going to be more or less always jumping between low and high digits. So we might be going from like a 2 to a 7, or a 3 to a 7 maybe, or a 4 to an 8. Doing these little hops of 4 or 5 at a time usually. Which kind of seems a little peculiar here, because if we're going from this low digit here, we're probably going to get to at least a middle, like a 5, or a high digit here. And that's going to make it hard to make our way up to another high digit here. And what I mean by that is, let's look at 4 as an example. If we had that as a 4, this would need to be at least 4 away, so it would have to be an 8 or a 9. You can't jump from an 8 or a 9 to another 6, 7, 8, 9, because they're not 4 away from that. So we're not leaving ourselves with a whole lot of room here to maneuver. If I put a 4 there. If I put a 3, we have the same thing happen. A little bit more freedom, but still restricted. We put a 3 there. To be 4 away from that, we need a 7, 8, or a 9. And as soon as we have that, we still cannot get over to a 6, 7, 8, 9 by jumping 4 away from any of these. Can't be a 3 either. And if we do the same with the 2, you're going to see the same thing happen. I'm not going to go through that. This must be a 1. With a 4 underneath it. Take those out there. We'll deal with the ramifications of that on the rest of the grid in a moment. Keep looking at the orange line here. We now know that's a 1. So to be 4 away from that, this must be at least a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. And as we just went over, there's really no way to do this with this being a high digit. If this is 6, 7, 8, 9, you can't get to another 6, 7, 8, 9 from being 5 away, or 4 away. So this must be a 5. This must be a 9. Now that is going to fill in a decent bit of the grid here, and work on a lot of these pencil marks, because we now have a 9 on 2 x's, so we can put the 1s next to. And now I'm going to go through and reduce these marks quite a bit. In many cases, we're going to get digits here, like the 1 on a 4 here with a 6 next to it. 1 and 4 can't be in either of those spots. This can't be a 6, so that takes out 4, 1, and 9. That can't be a 6, so we take out 4, 1. That can't be a 1, take out 9 and 4. Either of these can be a 1, so neither can be a 4 either. 3 means this must be 7, 8. 2, 3 in this row takes out 3. 2 and 3 also can't be a 1, so that gives us 4, 1 and 9. 4 and 1, 4 there. Here. Takes out 2, 3 in the row here. Be a 1, 4, 6. 7, 8 to match with that. And just like that, we've already done a lot of reduction. This is kind of the power of these XE puzzles, that once you make a bit of progress, a lot of the grid will start to sort of collapse upon itself, and it's really satisfying. Especially if you have all the options marked in here. It starts kind of messy, but you can see the powerful of this now, because let's look at this option that we didn't do any marks for. We have a lot of available options, but we have 1, 2, 3 in the row here. So this could not be a 1-9 pair. Can't be 2-3. Or not 2-3. It can't be 2-8, and it can't be 3-7 either. So this must be 4-6. Out of all that gibberish here, we can say that this must be 6-4 in some order. Look down here. This is probably still pretty restricted. Yep. We can take out 1-9 at least. Here we can take out two options. Can't be 1-9 or 4-6. Again, because it's column. Do a little bit more work down here. We have 2-3 and 2-3 in this column. Takes out those. That must be 6 or a 9 next to it. And similarly, there's also 2-3 and 2-3 in this column. And this is what's going to allow us to step further in the puzzle. This is, I think, probably the hardest step, just kind of recognizing these columns having these disjointed pairs like this. That 2-3 and 2-3 means this must be a 1. 4 and a 6 and a 9. Over here, that's 1, 6. This can't be 4-6 anymore. And this also cannot be 1-9. And this is the important step now, is to recognize, see if you can figure out what's special about this white dot now that we've taken out 1 from the bottom option. What's special about this is we now have a white dot, so consecutive digits, with only 3 digits possible. 2, 3, and 4, in some order. Can't have a 4 on top, but we're either going to have 2, 3, 2 with a 3, 2, or a 3, 4 underneath. All 3 of those situations involve having a 3 in spots. That also just kind of makes sense if you think about having 3 sequential digits. In order to chain any of them together, the middle one has to be there. So in this case, that's 3. That 3 in this column means you can no longer have a 3 here. That must be a 2 with a 3 and an 8. And that immediately bounces back down here by telling us, well, you can't have a 2 there. So this must be the 3 and the 4 underneath. 7 is there. And now, it kind of at first glance looks like we're sort of out of options, but this is where we're going to rely on just kind of standard classic Sudoku rules. So at this point in a puzzle like this, I usually just look for boxes or rows or columns that don't have a whole lot of spaces left to fill in. Such as this box up here, where we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 9 used up. So these cells must be 6, 7, 8 in some order. Now, we could see this with classic Sudoku just looking at the columns as well, that we can't have a 6 in either spot here. 6 in this box must go there. Leave 7 and 8 as the remaining options here. This row now has 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, and 9 used. This must be 5, 6 in some order. That fills in that. The top row of this box, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in use. This must be 7, 8, 9. And this is our first instance of being able to notice the all possible x's and z's part coming into play. We have a 1 here, and we have a candidate for a 9 here, but there's no x here, meaning this cannot be 9. That's going to force a 9 into this corner. This row is missing 4, 5, 6 in the middle here. That must be a 5 there, 6 and 4. Finish off this box, we need a 7 here. Let's keep working my way around the grid here. This box, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 in use, along with 6 and 9. So we need 5, 7, 8 in some order. 8 can't go there. Doesn't seem like a lot more of this part of the grid quite yet. In these sorts of puzzles, I also tend to just kind of look at random digits sometimes. Like this one here is surrounded by 1, 4, 7, 6, 8, 2, a lot of options. So if we just look at the remaining options, 6, 7, 8, it's either 5 or 9. So that is already more restricted than it looks. And as you can see, we have another negative constraint moment here. This can't be a 9 because it's next to a 1. That must be a 5. And you might notice now that 5s are actually pretty restricted in XV puzzles, because anywhere you see an X or a V, you can't have a 5. So even though we only know this 1, 5 here, that takes out 2 options there. Can't be in any of those. 5 must go there. That's going to help us over here. Forcing a 5 here. Yes, we can. We have 5s in these 2 columns here, so those are locked out. Must be a 5 in the here. These 5s up here mean you can't have a 5 in either of those spots. Put a 5 here. These 2 5s eliminate 5s from there. 5 here. And just like that, all the 5s are placed, as well as the 4s and 6s. So, making some pretty good progress here. Let's look at the middle box now, because it's only 3 remaining. We need a 1, 7, and a 9. 1 can't go in either of those spots. 7 and 9 goes there. We can now use the negative constraint again, that we have a 7 here next to a 3. That can never be a 3, because we would need an X there. That's 2, 3, and 8. It's going to tell us all of these up here. This can't be 3, 7 anymore. That tells us with this being a 1, a 2, 8, this row or column needs a 7. Needs a 9 here. These 3 cells need to be, we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9. Either of these can be a 7, so the 7 goes there. 7 being next to a 3, 9 here. You can't have a 3 there, because again, we would need an X, so that must be 9, 3. These 2 columns both only have 2 options remaining. 2, 9 here. In that order, this column needs 7. 7 and 1. These 2 options here. This row needs a 2 and 8. Maybe this column, 2, 3, and 2, 3 here. That 7, 8 is being unresolved, like that. 7 and 8. Missed this a bit ago. We have a 2 next to a possible 8 here. That doesn't work because we need an X. That means 7, 8, 7, and 8. That 8 and the 7 both restrict this now. You can't have 7, 3 there. So 2, 3, 2, 3. 3 here. 7 down here. Row or column needs another 2, 8 as an option there. Now this is a case where the negative V constraint is in. That we have a 2 next to a 3 here. You can't have that because they would sum to 5. They would need a V in between them. That gives us 8 here. 8, 8, 2, and I believe a 9. Yes. Alright, and that solves the puzzle. So, relatively approachable. Again, this took 17 minutes because I was talking through all this. If you're doing this in your head, you could probably do it a bit quicker. Or if you're not just commentating out loud to strangers on the internet. It does say, great work, see if you can spot the patterns in the grid now. This is sort of the behind the scenes of how I made this puzzle. I just wanted to have an XV puzzle, and I figured I'd just find some cool pattern in the grid and just see what happens if I apply the XV thing on top of it. You might have noticed earlier, that the top 3 rows are in order, 1, 2, 3 through 9. This is now offset, but this box is also going in order here. Same with the rows, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, you can't continue that further in the grid just because you would break the puzzle. You can't lay them out that way, otherwise. At least not without them being offset a little further. So the true pattern here is not actually really the top 3 rows, but really looking at the columns. We have 1, 4, 7 there, which is the one side of the numpad on your keyboard. 1, 4, 7 here, 1, 4, 7 there. Similarly, we have 2, 5, 8, 2, 5, 8, and 2, 5, 8. 3, 6, 9, 3, 6, 9, and 3, 6, 9. And you notice all of the columns in the grid are this pattern, but in slightly offset order. So 6, 9, 3 instead of 3, 6, 9 is kind of copying itself down in this order. 9, 3, 6 is here. 7, 1, 4 is 4, 7, 1 is here. It's just the same sort of pattern in each of the columns here. And that's sort of noticeable as well if you look at all of the X and V placements. That example here. That we have this 1, 4, 6 sort of L shape here. We also have a 1, 4, 6 L shape there. Those are other examples of, yeah, the 1, 4, 6 over here, 1, 4, 6 there. And that's because we're having the same pattern, just pretty much copy itself downwards. You can also notice that the diagonal is 1, 5, 9, 5, 9, 1, 9, 1, 5. It's all 1, 5, 9s. The original version of this puzzle had the Dutch Whisper line extend all the way down to the bottom right. But as we just witnessed, we don't need that extending all the way for it to be useful. You could, and it would probably make the puzzle significantly easier, because it's just another restriction on top of everything, but I didn't want it to be too easy, so I took it out, looked at what the bare minimum would be, and determined this was a good level to leave it at. Yeah, so that solves this puzzle. Thank you for watching.